Here we are, guys, Terra Symbolica fans. Please like, share and subscribe. And I'm here with Russell again, and tonight we're going to go and watch There Will Be Blood with Daniel Day-Lewis, directed by, what's the director's name? This way.
Yeah.
What's the director's name again?
The director's name is Paul Thomas Anderson.
Paul Thomas Anderson, renowned American director. Okay, so There Will Be Blood was released in 2007, and because I am very ill prepared for this evening, I remember enjoying the film, primarily because it has Daniel Day-Lewis in it, who's just a phenomenal method actor, right? So In the Name of the Father, in the early 90s, let's go this way. He starred in Lincoln, a biopic of Abraham Lincoln, directed by Steven Spielberg. He starred in a bunch of movies, man. What else is Daniel Day-Lewis in? Last of the Mohicans, right? So,
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah.
Did you say Gangs of New York?
Gangs of New York, Bill the Butcher, right? Martin Scorsese. So that's another great film. Phantom Thread, which we haven't seen, neither of us have seen. And that's also by Paul Thomas Anderson. Anyway, before I turn over to Russell to speak to you about the film, check out this lovely Art Deco cinema we're at again. It's the Ritz. I've shown you the Ritz before.
One battle after another.
One battle after another, where is it advertised here? That's another Paul Thomas Anderson film that's getting rave reviews at the moment. The Ritz, we've been to several times over the past couple of years because they put out all of these classic films. And I think let's cross the road because I want to get a view of it from the outside. We did the whole Dario Argento thing with friends a couple of years ago with Chris, my brother. Russell and I did a review of Dario Argento's Deep Red. That's the cinema. You can see it's very Art Deco, early 20th century, it's those rounded sort of curves and sharp edges on the characters. The Ritz there, you've got these very long high walls and these ridges on the like the entablature at the top there, you can see, right? Rounded curves as well. It's kind of like the architecture that you see in the mid-90s Batman animated series, right? Big curves, lots of straight lines. So yeah, that's just a little bit on the symbolism of the cinema itself. It kind of goes hand in hand with the golden age of cinema, when you go and see these classic films, to see them in a place which is designed in the Art Deco style. It works because the golden age of cinema is usually associated with the time when this style was very much in fashion. Alright, so that's enough from me. Russell, tell us about this brilliant film that we're going to watch.
So background for the film.
You can take the camera.
Oh,
that's a first. I'm trusting you with it.
Well, I don't know if I can do it because I'm not.
Lift it up a little bit. So
I'm not very good at. I'm not very good at.
Unlike mine.
Doing the thinking of two things at once. I can't use holder on me, and I told.
Oh, okay, fine.
Right. Yes. Then I get to muse. All right. So here's what you need to know about the film. If you haven't watched the film, it's a Western film, but it's set in the turn of the 19th century, when this was the period of the just after the gold rush, but mostly it was like an oil rush in California. And it's about Daniel Plainview, that's the pseudonym he sort of goes by, he starts off as mining for silver.
Played by Daniel Day-Lewis.
And then goes into discovering and making some money to go into oil. And then the film is basically set about his journey in becoming incredibly rich making oil. And the film centers around him and his son. There's a few other characters that come into it. Importantly, Eli Sunday, who is a young preacher and son of Abel, who Daniel Plainview has to buy some land off in which to make some money from pulling the oil out of the ground in that area. But primarily it's just really a very long, quiet, cinematography focused film. It's a film that's supposed to be very focused about the kind of physical, raw process of having to pull the oil out of the ground and what's involved. Importantly, Paul Dano plays Eli, he's going to be an important character. And some of the themes we're looking at, because we're looking at the symbolism, we're looking at some things like there's a lot of different interpretations people have drawn into the films. You can also look at, there's a good Charlie Rose interview with Paul Thomas Anderson, the director, and Daniel Day-Lewis, and they give their 2 cents on some of the stuff, not giving away everything. But essentially, the film is based on a book by Upton Sinclair, who was
Upton, what a great name.
Yeah.
Should come back into fashion.
It is
Upton.
a really good name. So he wrote this book, Oil, with exclamation mark at the end. And the idea of the book was much more about the sort of very early American progressive politics at the time. So this is, just after the Russian Revolution, communism spreading around the world, and a lot of the ideas in America sort of becoming born through this Labour-style movement. Upton Sinclair was part of the Democratic Party, sort of in the mold of Woodrow Wilson and other American politicians of a similar ilk. He ended up running for governor in 1934, I think. I don't think he was successful. But his primary focus was on, he was a sort of what they called a muckraker. So a journalist who would be going around and looking for corruption in politics and prostitution and drug running and sort of salacious style stories, and
exposing the truth, in the tabloids.
And his main focus was on the ills of what he saw in capitalism.
The excesses.
The excesses.
Yeah.
And so this is where it's tricky with the film, because some see the film as unabashedly an argument about the evils of capitalism, but the film is a little less explicit in those details. There's a lot left out, and it's more of the symbolism and a little bit more of the psychology of the characters. So you don't get the politics, and Paul Thomas Anderson admits that too.
Which is interesting, because I always, from what I remember, like I told you, I only remember certain discrete and distinct scenes from the film, and also some, very cool one-liners by Daniel Day-Lewis. But capitalism seems to be bound up with resources, right? So the discovery of resources, natural resources like oil, pretty much fueled the whole industry in the early 20th century in a way that turned the United States into the most dominant market, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, oil was the liquid gold then.
That's right.
And some of the differences there is with gold, it was something that every person could do on their own. You go panning for gold, you can just one lone person, you find a good area, maybe you lease some land in which you can go down to the creek and pan for it. With oil, it's a different project. You need the skills and you need the industry.
Prospecting.
Yes, you need to go and find the right place, but you need the community.
That's right, yeah.
And so, as we'll talk about after the film, it's a very different project for him, because it starts with, I think it's like 16 minutes it opens, with just him in the ground trying to find silver, and just hard yakka, hard work.
Yeah.
Really brutal. And then we see him years later with a man with a voice who could talk, and he's a salesman. All of a sudden, he's spinning. And
grifter.
Yeah, essentially. So, how much more do we want to give away?
Well, let's just dwell on the capitalism side of things just briefly. So obviously capitalism.
We go around.
Yeah, we can go around. It's quite nice here. We try to get away from the busyness of St. Paul Street in Randwick. Capitalism is essentially what? How can you define it? I mean, we're all conditioned by it, right? But free market capitalism is something that has undergone various transmutations, at least since the Industrial Revolution, which directly contributed to the kind of oil rush because of the advances in certain technologies like fracking and everything else. You could drill deeper in order to get more oil, etc. But capitalism is essentially the use or exchange of commodities for other commodities, right? So basically, if you agree on an exchange value of a certain item, right? It could be a plow or it could be a truck. It doesn't matter. that item can be used in order to generate more capital, whether that be other items or revenue. Okay, so it's both, in a sense, the money that's generated from the use of certain technologies, the technologies themselves, right? This is all capitalism.
Yeah.
Okay, so according to Yanis Varoufakis, and I've been reading, he was the ex-finance minister of Greece during the GFC, the great financial crisis that took place in 2008, right? Which basically saw the entire Greek economy collapse, and he was brought on by the leftist government at the time, Syriza, by Tsipras, who was the prime minister, in order to fix it. He's Greek. He's from Greece. He lived in Australia for a while, moved back to Greece, and now he's in the UK. And he thinks that we're moving into another phase of capitalism called pretty much cloud capital, right? So that we've kind of moved from a place where...
Technologically based.
It's technologically based, but capitalism in the United States is predicated on the fact that private industry, as a private individual, you can, if you put the effort in, generate enough revenue using the various technologies of capitalism in order to have prosperity. And if many people do that, then that's a successful society. Gosh, I'm so unfit, bro.
Yeah, so am I.
I'm losing my breath.
Just on that point, so I think it's probably worth tying.
And now the private individuals are all elites, techno elites.
Right?
Right?
I think it's worth tying a knot on. It's important because I'll talk about it later. There, some of the critiques of the film were generally from socialist Marxist perspectives, and that the film was not looking at material conditions behind what's going on in the story and what goes on in the book. And that could be a fair criticism. I care for it because I prefer more of this symbolic, psychological approach. But then there's still a few other ways you can do it. So there's the obvious one that comes up a lot, that this is a kind of Nietzschean look into the will to power. And you see it in Eli, you see it in
So you're not looking at pretty much socioeconomic and political factors. You're looking at how they're embodied in a person, in a character.
You don't have to. You don't focus on it's a message. I'm trying to sell you something. Like David Lynch says, don't think I'm trying to sell your message. I'm not preaching all the time in my movies.
That's right.
It's art. So one of the points is that it does appear to be like capitalism versus exploitative religion, and
represented by what's his name, Sunday, Eli Sunday, Paul Dano, brilliant performance.
So I think Lutheran, their background was, but it has that kind of, well, to me it seems more Baptist, fire and brimstone style preaching. But one of the important parts of that is that both of these models were seen, like particularly with the separation of church and state, that people used to argue because there was no representative religious community or identity, it became a free market for that too. So the religion could be a capital. So look, there's lots of different ways you could see, were they both in a battle for each other? Are they both just two
like Paul Dano's character and Plainview played by Daniel Day-Lewis.
And maybe they're saying America is just truly a wild place because both the capitalism side of it is wild, and so is the religious side. Yeah. And they both lead to blood.
Yeah. There will be blood. That's the name of the film, obviously. Yeah.
And then there's all those allegorical themes of blood. But another thing I'll bring up, and I thought was interesting, is there's some Freudian. Oh yeah, the beach. There's some Freudian Lacanian views. I'm not an expert on these, but in general, there's this idea of the film is all based on men. There's very few female characters, barely any dialogue. You don't actually get to know the stories of the relationships with their mothers.
No.
There's a lot left unsaid, and a lot of that is because of the subconscious mind. You don't know how it works. You're trying to interpret things through the person, and usually you have this moral arc, the 3 stages of the film. They set the character. Is he a good bad guy with some redemption arc?
Because it's ambiguous at the beginning. You don't know if he's a good guy or not. Daniel Plainview, right?
You'd think he might.
He could possibly be a good guy. He keeps talking about, my prosperity, private individual gain. Remember, capitalism is predicated on that. Will lead to the prosperity of the town if you give me access to your oil fields.
And that's how he has the battle with Eli.
That's right.
Because Eli is going to say, well, I have the control of you because I have the church.
That's right.
And then because of his sins,
that's very medieval though, but in a sense in the United States that continues to play out.
But there is this other theme that maybe you should pay attention to, the relationship of the kind of I'm butchering this, and if anyone knows Lacan or Freud better, correct me. But a lot of the ideas are, when you're born, this is the original trauma. You're in the womb, you're nurtured, you're comforted. Then you're born in muck, feces, plasma. What is it?
Yeah,
all kinds
it's
of
all the kind of
goo.
fluid. Yeah.
Anyone that's had kids will know what it's like.
If you've been in the in the room, yeah,
and there's
right,
this separation, and then there's the needing. So he's talking about. Daniel talks about Eli and his brother, and who gets chosen, the mother choosing. There's a lot of these kind of symbols about the need to identify with the mother. Maybe there's an alienation, and that's what's made them the way they are. They're ambitious for something, they're envious for something, they don't know what it is.
And maybe that has to do with a broken relationship with their mother, is what you're from a Freudian perspective, let's say.
Freudian, yeah. The Lacanian
and
one is
Lacan.
really confusing. I've tried to understand.
Can we return to it after we watch the film?
That's the thing. No, it's just something to take note of before we go in.
Okay, all right.
We'll see if we can notice it more, because it's something I didn't pick up on before. Because everyone was fighting over... I didn't even
think of this.
Because everyone's thinking it's the capitalism religion thing.
That's where my mind goes immediately.
And also, everyone's like, oh, it's just a Nietzschean will to power. Sorry, I don't mean that in a dismissing Nietzschean way. It's just...
Well, good. That's an interesting theme to explore in films.
Yeah.
And you see that in both of those characters.
There is the concept of Nietzsche's Christianity is a slave morality. That it restrains the human nature to become boring, equal.
As embodied by Eli's particular brand of charismatic revivalism.
No, he's the one that's like practicing, so he's clever, but he is still doing his will.
He's a manipulator.
Power.
Yeah, he's
but
a manipulator.
The project of that is that, like the Übermensch, the real human, the strong human, is one that's like raw in his nature, like practices what he feels is
more like
in his
Plainview.
Instincts. Yeah,
more like Plainview. That's why he wins in the end.
You don't want this like manipulated, controlled kind of let's all be good and God's people, and that's where you see there's this Plainview understands what Eli's doing. He knows he's a cunning operator.
Yeah.
But it's a very nihilistic view, and they end up
pretty much. We'll get to it, guys. We'll come back. Please leave a comment if you're interested in what we do here on the channel, because it's a labor of love. Like, subscribe, share, leave a comment, and give us feedback. Do you like what we're doing? We're trying to bring our academic skills to the fore here in the application of these analyses. You know, we're not really film experts. We just love movies. We're trying to get into some of that stuff ourselves in terms of how cinematography properly works. But because of our background in philosophy, theology, psychology, and art and architectural symbolism, we're able to kind of bring out things from these films, hopefully that you wouldn't have seen before, or maybe others haven't seen. So we'll be back after the movie.
Cheers.
Terra Symbolica fans, we are back with Russell Gore. Here he is at the Rose Hotel, where we've done a couple of videos before on Deep Red and Myth and Meaning, and we're going to continue our analysis of There Will Be Blood. So I'm just going to give you a brief synopsis of the film if you haven't seen it. It starts in the late 19th century with Daniel Day-Lewis's character, Daniel Plainview, mining. So it's this kind of the frontiers of resource extraction from the earth. He's dug a very deep hole and he's mining for silver, and that involves the use of TNT and explosives in order to extract the silver. He injures himself in the process, and it demonstrates the arduousness with which he undertakes difficulty, for example, in order to extract natural resources from the ground, shifting almost immediately to him and a team of people. So he's on his own extracting the silver, then it moves to him and a team of people, one of whom is a father of a little boy, couldn't be more than a year old, extracting oil from the ground. Okay, so they set up, what are those things called that set up the oil?
The derrick.
The derrick.
Yeah, and there's an important scene when the nemesis, Eli Sunday, comes to sort of have this insidious interaction where he wants to come and say, how are things going? I'd like to bless the well. And very subtly, he responds, it's a derrick.
Yeah, Plainview responds, it's a derrick. So the derrick is obviously, it's comprised of wooden beams, okay, and it's late 19th century now, it's not always going to adhere to occupational health and safety standards. So there is an accident where the pulley system that's being used to extract the oil pretty much in fits and starts from the bottom of the derrick with this primitive fracking process. They kind of let go of a metal beam that goes straight into the ground and the oil wells up. The pulley system falls apart and lands on and kills the father of that child right in front of Daniel Plainview, in front of Daniel Day-Lewis's character. And so with the father dead, he raises the boy, and you think at face value that this is all for altruism's sake, that he wants to step in and be the father to this orphan. In reality, it jumps into the future and it shows you Daniel Plainview now pretty much grifting by putting forward HW, the name of this boy, as his son, and kind of playing on the idea that this is a family business and that he's been in the oil business with his son for quite some time, and that they always do right by the people that they're purchasing the land off in order to extract the oil, even though it's very clear throughout the film that he won't give oil prices, he'll give land or even quail prices for the kind of territory that he's buying, the hectares of land from landowners. He doesn't want to tell them what's under there, because otherwise they will be able to kind of raise the prices of what they're charging him for the land. So from there it jumps into the future. And what happens next, Russell?
Well, I can't help but do a tangent.
Okay, do a tangent, but explain.
It's important because the first 16 minutes it's open, there's no dialogue, and there's a great interview with Paul Thomas Anderson and Daniel Day-Lewis with Charlie Rose, and they talk about how Daniel Day-Lewis was kind of chosen in mind when PTA, Paul Thomas Anderson, was writing the film, because it's very loosely adapted off the novel Oil by Upton Sinclair. And the importance was Daniel Day-Lewis is known to be a very rigorous method actor, which means he doesn't have a strict method that he follows. So he went and had to learn how to work in these things. So he said, I needed to know, how heavy does an axe feel? What's it like when I hit the surface? There's this intense physicality in the process of what he's doing. And this is the kind of stuff we've talked about before with like Foley, the sound engineers that have to produce the right sounds. You feel the anxiousness of him being down in the ground, and he could very well die and be forgotten.
Yeah. Because it's all practical effects undertaken through method acting, right? Because he's the one using the pickaxe, he's the one, presumably in the midst of the mud and the dirt in the ground.
And as an aside, I grew up working in a powder coating factory, which was lifting very, very hard, very, very heavy, large aluminium sheets covered in paint. Went through this oven cooker. Used to have this man. His nickname was Fabio. Very skinny, very strong. And one day he had this large case of aluminium packed together, fall on him, crushed some ribs, and he wailed. And I had never ever heard who I considered to be one of the most archetypical masculine strong men scream. And it's exactly what happens in the film. Daniel Day-Lewis does it. I don't know if many people have ever heard it, but if you hear a person that the kind of blokey tough men that you never see cry, never see scream, when they scream, it's horrible. And when he falls down, it's just unbelievable, because it's as if he's lived it. Yeah,
he falls down the well when he's mining for the silver at the very beginning and breaks his leg. And so this is all very much... No, you can't. This is all the beginnings of a kind of complicated industry that has to do with mineral extraction. Okay, so the technology is still more or less primitive in the late 19th century. Obviously, it grows throughout the 20th century in order to insulate the human worker from the dangers that take place with sort of mining into the ground this way. Nevertheless, it all comes to the danger comes to the fore in this film. It jumps from him and his son HW trying to negotiate with the community in order to extract the oil from their the deposits that they have discovered under the ground, to basically a scenario where Daniel Plainview is visited by Paul Sunday, played by Paul Dano, who is the brother of Eli Sunday, who features as Daniel Plainview's nemesis throughout the film, a charismatic revivalist preacher in the Church of the Third Revelation, very much signs and wonders, evoking the Holy Spirit to cast out demons and associating demons with various illnesses and so on and so forth. Paul Sunday comes to find Daniel Plainview and pretty much sells his father's estate to him. Well, what he does is he tells him that there's oil just under the ground, right? And the parlay between Daniel Plainview and Paul Sunday is very interesting, because Daniel's trying to extract more and more information from Paul, but Paul is very reluctant. He says, look, I'm not stupid, I want you to pay me X amount of money and then I'll tell you everything, right? And in the end, he does tell Daniel Plainview everything, where to locate his dad's hectares, how to get there, and in a very sort of foreboding scene, Plainview tells his assistant to pay Paul, but he says, if I don't find oil there, and if you've lied to me about the location, I'm going to take more than my money back. So it gives you a degree of the ruthlessness of this character in terms of his pursuit of profit, right? So anyway, he and HW, under the pretext of going quail hunting on this property, they find Abel, that's Paul and Eli's father's name, Abel Sunday's farm. It's quite a patriarchal family. Abel is the head of the family. He's got several daughters, Mary being the youngest, whom Daniel Plainview expressed some affection for Mary, who will eventually, towards the end of the film, marry his adopted son, HW.
He's bastard.
He's the bastard in a basket, which we'll get to. So he tries to pretty much, after spending some days quail hunting with the permission of Abel Sunday on the property, he tries to hoodwink him in order to buy the estate based on quail prices. He says to his son, we're going to offer them quail price. In other words, he tells him, look, I want to hunt for quail, and you've got great opportunity to do this on this property. Plus the boy, his doctor has told him that he needs the air. So he even pretends that his son is sickly in order to generate sympathy from his interlocutor in order to purchase a property. In which case, Eli interjects and says, what about the oil? And so the negotiation shifts away from Abel, who's clearly incompetent and quite daft, to Eli, who manages to get a higher price for the property. And pretty much his father just follows what Eli says, and this pressure that he exerts on Daniel, he's kind of frustrated and annoyed that this young man has the audacity to make demands from him, and that gives you an indication of the narcissism involved with Daniel Plainview's character. He seems like he's doing it for the community. He feigns altruism. Indeed, throughout the film, he expresses altruism towards HW in particular, but really, he doesn't want to be messed with. Yeah? What happens next?
Well, there's a few things. I think it's worth jumping ahead, is that later on, after there's an altercation between Daniel Plainview and Eli Sunday, where he rubs his face in the dirt.
But why? So could you fill in what happens? What does Eli, because I forgot to mention it, what does Eli principally ask for the money for?
So when they're having the discussion, importantly, Daniel says 5,000 for this now, 5,000 for later, and he says, what would you use it for? And Eli says, my church. And he says, he stalls and says, clever. He says, that's a clever one.
Yeah.
Oh, smart, that's a smart one. So he's basically acknowledging that he realizes this is a cunning kid, this is a cunning mind, that his intentions aren't really pure, and that they both know that they operate in a similar sense.
Yeah, Eli feigns piety externally in order to manipulate the community, to bolster his own persona and ego and position in the community. He tries to bind the establishment of the derrick on his father's property with the establishment and growth of the Church of the Third Revelation. And that's that charismatic stuff I mentioned earlier, with signs and wonders and, associating ailments and diseases with the demons and whatnot.
But you have to take note as well. Later in the film, Daniel points out that he is a competitive person. He's always competitive. He always wants to win at the expense of someone else.
Yeah.
Now, in that scene, after there's an intense fight with Daniel and he rubs Eli's face in the mud, he's sitting at the table covered in mud still, hasn't cleaned himself, looking at his father Abram, jumps up on the table and says, "You fool, you stupid, weak, insignificant man, you were fooled. It was our brother Paul who sold us out." Now, that means that Eli must have known in the beginning that's what was going on.
Yeah.
He knows that Paul must have made that arrangement. And Eli has made the calculation that he can work his way through the good grace of Daniel Plainview being a family man and selling himself to the community as a savior. He says it should not be seen eating bread as a luxury.
That's right. That's what Daniel Plainview says to the community, and that he'll bring education to the community.
But like particularly, this is like it's the second act. It's not the first act anymore, and it is very much the competition between the two of them.
Yep.
And that's why Daniel rubs his face in the dirt, humiliates him. And there's been a series of battles.
There's been up until this point, and this scene which is a very dramatic scene when. Because Daniel promises Eli $5,000 before the derrick is installed and $5,000 thereafter. But thereafter, he hasn't paid him. And there's an explosion of oil that gushes out like a geyser, covering the land with oil. And during this, when they finally puncture the ground and it all breaks forth, HW is injured. And this is a critical scene in the film. He goes deaf, right? And it's not that Daniel isn't concerned. He's concerned, right? But his priority is the oil and the derrick and its the maintenance of its stability.
Because what does Fletcher say to him?
Fletcher's his assistant, right?
Fletcher's his assistant standing next to him as they're looking at the fire coming out of the oil. I was going to say oil well, derrick, whatever. And he had just been home checking on
Kieran Hines, who plays Julius Caesar in Rome.
So Daniel had been checking on HW. He was holding him real as he couldn't hear, and he tries to leave him, but HW was saying don't go. He leaves, and then as he's looking at the fire, he says there's an ocean of
oil under our feet, and it's all mine.
Yeah, all mine.
Yeah.
And Fletcher says, how is HW going to be okay? He says, no, he's not.
No, he's not. He's still looking at the oil.
Yeah.
This performance is just phenomenal. Like, I got shivers just thinking about it. He goes, no, he's not. And he's staring with greed at the oil gushing all over him and gushing. And eventually he comes back and he does try to take care of HW. And as HW is trying to make sounds to hear himself going, it's a very sad scene. He's holding him tightly and expressing some frustration and saying, that's enough of that, HW. That's enough of that.
We moved to that aspect, just two important bits.
No, very, very briefly. I'll return to these bits. It's connected to why Daniel Plainview finally loses his patience with Eli, because Eli has...
Wait, you have missed an important part of the competition. Okay, so when it begins, he comes in, as I was mentioning before, he comes in with this kind of coming up and praying and singing to some of the congregants of the third revelation.
That's right.
And Daniel Plainview is looking up and he is just like, what is going on?
Distracting them from their work. He's distracting the men, Daniel Plainview's men, from their work.
But this is a titan of industry that's taken on some of the best. He's ready for a fight. He threatens someone to slit his throat because he sees him as offending him. Yeah. But this kid is very clever and coming in and saying, I want to bless the well and I want you to name me, and has this little phrase like,
son of these hills.
Son of these hills, blesser of so-and-so. And so what Daniel does to snide, to sort of spite of him, blesses Mary and blesses the well himself.
Yeah.
And you can see how furious Eli is. So he's wanting revenge. Yeah. And when he invites him up to see the church, Daniel sits in and Eli's doing this performance, casting out a spell, and he's doing all the animated evangelical kind of possessed by a spirit, and cast the spirit out. And then afterwards he says to him, because this is when a worker has died and it's a bad look, he says, I'd like you to come and bless the person's belongings and get them sent away.
The person who died, yeah.
But the last remark he makes to him is, that was a very good show. So they know they're in competition.
And they know that they're putting up performances to the community. Both of them are. They're hypocrites, in other words.
Yeah.
And the pretext on Daniel's side is benefiting the community economically from the offcuts of his oil rigging endeavor. Yeah. For Eli, it's a social standing predicated on his pseudo-religiosity. So we've covered a few things and backtrack, but nevertheless, this incident between Eli and Daniel at the anointing of the derrick, right? Where instead, as you rightly mentioned, instead of allowing Eli, who had demanded, he didn't ask, he said, "You will introduce me in front of the community as a proud son of these hills, and I will give the blessing." And Daniel Plainview is looking at him, and he goes, "It'll only be a short blessing, Daniel, but it'll be important." He goes, right you are. He leaves, right? And then he substitutes Eli for Mary, and a proud daughter of these hills, he calls it deliberately, which pisses off Eli, and then he himself gives the blessing, which is hypocritical because he's obviously an atheist. At the end, he forces Eli to, at the very final scene of the film, to admit that God is a superstition. At least that's what Daniel Plainview himself believes, right? But the reason why you have that kind of tension between two characters exploding in basically Daniel beating up Eli, thrusting his face into the oil, is because post the injury, right, he had seen, as you mentioned, Russell, this show in the church where Eli takes away this old woman's arthritis and casts the demon out. But now for some time after the explosion of oil in the rig, it's gushering out, and HW's injury, HW can't hear, he's deaf, right? And he's looking at Eli as Eli's marching across the field to speak to Daniel in front of his peers. And he goes, "Where's the money, Daniel?" And Daniel just punches him in the face, and he hits him again. And his colleagues try to stop him, and he just beats the hell out of him. "Where were you when my boy was injured? Huh? Where's your powers?" or something like that. Like he points out, he gets frustrated with Eli's hypocrisy, beats him to death. Half to death, not really, he just beats him terribly. And then Eli goes back to his father and expresses his resentment, not to Daniel because he's a weakling, right? He doesn't react to Daniel. Instead, he scapegoats his father, who mistakenly sold the hectares to Daniel, and he beats up his father. That is the telltale sign of a spineless, weak individual. Instead of responding to your aggressor, you allow that aggression and resentment to build up, and you take it out on somebody who can't fight back, which is his elderly dad, right? So Eli is a piece of work.
Yeah, but this gets to a point where, so there were 2 points I was going to bring up. One I'll get to later, but it's a minor point, but the Johnny Greenwood's music score and how important it is the horror theme, but the other one is the anti-hero theory. So Eli has no redeemable qualities. None.
He's just a bastard.
Whereas most people all tend to agree, at least from the papers I read on it and reviews, that he's a psychopath, Daniel. But his relationship with HW is very warm in moments. He's upset that his boy wasn't healed. He stops the beatings of Mary from Abel because Mary comes and sits on his lap and he says, "I hear you've been getting beaten by someone for not praying right." And he says, "That won't happen anymore, will it?" And then turns and looks him dead in the eye, and Abel just looks to the ground.
That's right.
The coward he is. There's the other scenes of when he's hugging HW after HW, they're covered in oil, he's cradling him like you would a child that you love and care for, and HW's trying to go so he can hear, and you can see he's frustrated but still holding him in an embrace. So there's,
and when eventually he'll send HW away after another twist in the plot, which is when somebody turns up pretending to be Daniel's brother, and he actually has documentation and evidence to suggest, like a diary, right? It suggests that he is Daniel's long lost brother who he never knew about, and this guy then takes the place of HW in this is a family business. You know, the whole point, the way that he elicits sympathy from people in order to be able to draw up his contracts with them to take their money is by lying about family, because he doesn't have family, right? Or at least he has family and he's estranged from them. So he lies about HW being sick, he lies to another couple earlier on by saying that, when they ask what about the mother, he says that she died in childbirth. Okay, now he himself, paradoxically, ironically, is being lied to by someone who claims to be his family, and he believes it. And perhaps out of jealousy, HW lights fire to the cabin that all three of them are sleeping in. And that's the last straw for Daniel, and he sends HW for a time to a boarding school.
Yeah.
And then he goes around with his fake brother, who he thinks is his actual brother, until this brother he exposes himself as being a fraud. How does that happen?
Well, they're heading up to the Bandy tracks. So William Bandy owns the last piece of land that they need to build the oil rig to go down to Union Oil down on the California coast.
Yeah.
And
because Union Oil can then transport the oil by ship, and this way they avoid all of the costs associated with freight by train, right? Which is more expensive.
Yeah, there were all these deliberations early on with the local land contractor who does all the deals. He said everything can be got, and then they said there's one person holding out, and Daniel dismisses it. And he says, "Should we go up and meet him?" He says, no, we'll get to it in due time.
He just never got to it.
He doesn't really take it seriously. And William requested a meeting, says he wants to go up. So Daniel doesn't do it. And so William Bandy holds out this whole time. And then when they go on and travel, they get to the place, and there's a son there. I think it's a grandson, and he's like, "What do you want?" And he's like, "I know who you are. You can't buy these lands. My grandfather, William Bandy, is out." And Daniel says, well, we're going to come back in a week and meet with him to buy the land. And they start staking out where they're going to build this.
That's right, yeah. So without permission, he just starts staking out the land as though it already belongs to him.
Yeah. And what happens is, in part of their journey, they end up at a beach, and there's these discussions. There's a really interesting discussion.
That's Daniel and his fake brother, Henry.
Brother. We can't go through all. We need a transcript, but Daniel starts to open up and talk about how his brother coming back into his life has changed his perspective on things, and that he started to grow this feeling of hatred towards people and alienation.
Before, no, that's right. No, you're right.
Because he said, like, I feel this competition in me.
Yeah.
And when I see others, I just find things to not like. And I find it hard for anything that I can like.
I don't want anyone to succeed, anyone else to succeed. Yeah.
And it's this competition.
He's a narcissist, You don't think he's a narcissist?
I think narcissist has a different term. He's misanthropic.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
He's got some hatred directed towards others, but he's got this affection for his brother, and he talks about him coming back into his life has made him feel something different.
Yeah, that's right.
He doesn't, though, want to talk about his wife, and they don't have any discussions about them.
Yeah, because this brother actually thinks that HW is his son, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot left out, and that's what I was saying, that the paper on the Lacan analysis it's what's left out of the film that makes it so difficult to interpret. You don't get given all, like, what was his upbringing? Was he beaten as a child, or we don't know. And then when they're discussing something about, they're on the beach, and he says, let's party. The brother says, we'll find some women. Daniel says, we could take him to the peach tree. The peach tree
dance,
yeah. And he doesn't.
There's no recognition by Henry. He doesn't understand. This should have been something that Henry presumably would have known about as happening in their town, maybe annually, something like that.
If you want to know the technical term in philosophy, conversational implicature, and what we have is, when we talk, we have speech acts. We say things, right? There's the locution. You say words. The peach tree dance. But anyone from another language would go, what does that mean?
That's right. Yeah.
So you have the speaker who has the illocutionary act. That's what you intend to say. And there's the perlocutionary act, what you're supposed to elicit. So there's certain things you say that elicit a very particular response. Not something like the peach tree dance. Oh yes, the peach tree dance. You need to elicit a response. Oh yeah.
Do you remember that? Yeah.
The one where so-and-so did this and this.
Yeah, that's
blah,
right.
Blah, blah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
There is some conversational implicature in that's gone wrong and broken down, which means that he's not the authentic person he's meant to be. And the menacing look. You can see him, like his gears grinding, he's digesting in his mind what's going on, that he's been lied to. And then there's the scene as the waves crash over him.
He goes into the ocean after that. They were sitting on the beach, and he has this look of consternation, and then he goes into the ocean, and
it's just a menacing stare.
It's like he wants to kill him.
And then what he's doing is he's calculating.
Yeah.
He's calculating what's going to happen. He's realised. They go to the next scene, and again, his brother HW is coming to him asking for money, please.
Brother is Henry, HW's the son.
Oh, sorry, his brother Henry is asking for money for women. He seems high.
Or drunk.
Yeah, I couldn't make that out, but drunk and high. Asking for money with women. Daniel's got no interest. He never really seems to express any interests in women.
And shows utter contempt for Henry as he gives him money. And then right after that, they're sleeping out in the woods.
Yeah.
And he pointedly grabs Henry while he's asleep and asks him what was the name of the house next to the farm next to our place. And then Henry couldn't answer it, and then he admits that he is a fraud, that he had met. He goes, do I have a brother? Daniel asks him, do I have a brother? He goes, yes, but he died. He goes, from tuberculosis. So it wasn't anything bad. I got to know him when we were both working down south or something like that, and he kept talking about you, but then he got sick and he died, and I just took his identity, that's all, but I'm your friend, Daniel, I'm your friend. At which point Daniel takes out a small pistol and shoots him in the head.
Well, and there's an important thing, I don't know if you remember what happened afterwards.
He buries him.
Yeah.
Well, you say.
No, he buries him and then what?
Bandy comes.
No, see, you've missed it.
Yeah, tell me what
he's looking through the diary of his brother.
Oh, he's looking through the diary of his brother, that's right.
And what happens? Right. What happens to the oil man, the tough, rugged, strong-willed psychopath?
Yeah, he breaks down.
He breaks down, weeping.
Yeah, he breaks down.
See, this is why I have a problem with these interpretations, that he's just a stone-cold capitalist killer.
That's an element to him. There's an element of that to him, because this ruthless competition is a characteristic feature of this sort of late 19th century, early 20th century free market capitalism, as predicated upon the extraction of these natural resources, which can be sold for exorbitant amounts of money. He is ruthless in his seeking out, in his purchasing of land, and in his extraction of this commodity in order to make himself rich. So that is there, right? But he also is a complex figure, because people, it's not as if all rich people don't have a heart, don't have emotions. I mean, obviously he does have emotions, but the way with which he deals with competition and with antagonists is brutal. A lot of people don't. What does he say to the guys, not the Union Oil guys, the other guys who want to buy him out before he can make a deal with Union Oil? Do you remember? What does he say to the guy who says to him, come on, sell us what you've got, your property, and then we'll, and you can take care of your son. What does he say?
He says, don't tell me how to take care of my family. And he says, one night I'm going to come to you, in your house, and I'm going to slit your throat.
Yeah.
But there's an important point to that, which is what I'm trying to get at, is that he actually has more humanity than Eli, because he's very touchy.
I agree with that.
He's very touchy about how to raise a family, about his relationships with people. Of course, towards the end, he has a flashback after he ends up revealing to his son the true relationship that they have. There's flashbacks of him.
It's not just a revelation. He demoralizes and abuses his son in that instance.
But there's a different aspect of, like, the beginning of the film is the analogy, like I was saying, to birth. Birth is rough and violent and hard and difficult, and many in the past, most birth, there would be death. And also this, theme continues towards the end when he talks about Eli as slithering out his mother's canal when he was born. So there's this thing about, is it with Daniel that he's just been brutalized by his environment in the past we know nothing of?
Yeah, we know nothing
that
about.
Maybe he was a human and he wanted connection to his brother, which is why he weeps. He loves HW, but he holds him close and pushes him away.
Yeah, ambivalent character.
Eli never has any of that. Eli is just awful. awful.
He's awful. In fact, I got a lot of satisfaction when
he gets
killed. When he gets killed, it's a bit brutal. I like, as in, okay, it works very well in the film. I mean, when he beats him up, in the oil field, I'm like, you deserve it, you bastard. But what about, so what's the next stage in their ongoing rivalry? Now we've entered the third act. So Bandy discovers him after he's killed his brother, and he kind of knows that he's killed him. Maybe he's been tracking them, maybe he saw it, we don't know.
He has one condition.
And what's that, Russell?
He wants him to go to the third revelation and be forgiven for his sins.
And be baptized. So basically, in the blood. So baptism, of course, is the main initiation ritual of Christianity, which involves a participation in Jesus Christ's death and resurrection. In traditional churches, you see this with full immersion. And water is, it symbolizes the tomb within which Christ was buried. So when you come out of the water, you're resurrected with him, right? But baptism is followed closely by participation in the Eucharist, the Thanksgiving celebration, which is predicated on participating in the bread and the wine that become Christ's body and blood. That's in traditional churches. You'll find that in Orthodoxy, you'll find that in Catholicism, you'll find that in Orthodoxy, you'll find it in Catholicism. With these charismatic revivalist churches, you don't usually have sacraments apart from baptism. They come out of the radical Reformation that took place in the European continent in the 16th century. So a lot of them just have baptism, and because they just have baptism for the remission of sins, they conflate baptism with the blood of Jesus that, you know, washes away sins. So it's not traditional Christianity, it's very much charismatic, kind of on the edges periphery Christianity that took place throughout that kind of proliferated in the United States along the frontier, in the West, where people could pretty much become self-styled preachers and teachers, like you see in Deadwood with the preacher character, who's a benevolent character, and so on and so forth. So Eli is one of these figures. To become a member of his church, you need to be baptized with water, and water and blood are conflated. That's the symbolism there. It's what takes place at that baptism, which is really interesting, because as a very proud man, Daniel Plainview does not want to be baptized, certainly not in the church of his nemesis, right? Eli. But he accepts because he needs Bandy to give him, to allow him to rent his land in order to put down the oil pipeline out to the ocean. So what he does is he gives his assent, and he goes and is baptized at the Church of the Third Revelation. And what happens there?
I got distracted because I didn't know you'd seen Deadwood.
I've seen Deadwood, of course I've seen Deadwood. How have I not seen Deadwood?
It has to be the greatest television series ever.
Yeah, but let's focus on this. Yeah.
So, I lost my train of thought.
What happens at the baptism?
Oh, the baptism could be arguably one of the best scenes. This is Eli's. Is it revenge? I think it is.
It's his revenge.
I think it's revenge, and I think he wants to humiliate him the way he felt humiliated. And
when he was bashed in the oil, yeah.
And he invites him up and says, I want you to accept the blood of Christ and repent of your sins. But of course, he's not content with the manner in which Daniel is doing it.
Yeah, he forces him to get on his knees. Daniel's going, I repent of my sins, yes, let's get on with it, kind of thing. And he goes, no, you got to get on your knees. You got to say it so that God can hear you. And he goes, I repent of my sins. He goes, now tell us what your sins are. He goes, well, you tell me, Eli, what are my sins? He goes, well, you abandoned your son. You abandoned your boy. And then he pushes him, right?
Yeah, he pushes him so he can say himself, I've abandoned my son. I've abandoned my son.
Yeah. You can see that.
His face is clenched, red, but there's one moment where he says it genuinely.
Yeah, and his conscience has definitely been affected by Eli. It's made him very uncomfortable that Eli, someone he despises, has triggered his conscience, has actually prompted him to acknowledge in front of everybody as a moment of catharsis, perhaps, I've abandoned my boy. And he goes, now get this over with, Eli, let's get this over with. Like he wants to get, so I can get out of here, he says.
Give me the blood.
Give me the blood. And Eli's like slapping him in the face repeatedly in order to get the demon out of him, right? And in the end, They splash water on his face, he's baptized, and he becomes a member of the Church of the Third Revelation. And when people are hugging him, the only genuine response he has is to Mary giving him a kiss on the cheek. And he touches her hand, because she comes from behind him, and he goes, "Sweet Mary, sweet Mary." Yeah, you're right, he's a nuanced character. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's phenomenal.
It's it's very, very complex. And so then moving from that moment, that moves into the final stages where we get to move forward in time. We see that he's got this beautiful house, and so in part of his opening up to his brother, he says, "I'd like to buy enough money to move away from people, so I have nothing to do with humans." And this is the house he lives in. There's this scene of him in a large room just shooting around.
But before that, we've missed something. It's the fact that he gets his son back after this. He recalls his son back from the boarding school.
I wanted to bring that
up. He's very apologetic to his son. He embraces him, and he takes him to show him now this new oil pipeline that goes straight out to the ocean, the way that he had told his son before the accident. That's what he was planning on doing. His son punches and kicks him. He goes, that's all right, okay. And then he takes his son out for a steak dinner. He gets him a teacher to help him with sign language, because he's deaf, so to teach him sign language. He rubs it into his competitors that, he's actually managed to get a deal with Union Oil and to take the oil out to the sea, where he'll be avoiding the freight costs and making a lot more money. And then it jumps from a scene of his boy playing around the derrick and around the encampment with Mary, and Mary learning to sign and to sign to him. And it's quite beautiful, actually. It's quite moving. Mary is now in her bridal gown, signing to him in church, in a Catholic mass. So traditional mass. She's left the charismatic revivalism, the kooky Christianity, if you like, of her youth, and she's become a traditional Christian, and so has HW. So I was happy with that, obviously. And they're getting married in church. Now older, obviously, they're adults. And then it jumps to this scene that Russell was talking about with lonely, old, hands trembling, decrepit Daniel Plainview shooting random objects in this enormous mansion that he's purchased.
Yeah, there was, I would bring up, and I mentioned there's a podcast called Sub brackets text, and it's about film analysis with Wes from Partial Examine Life podcast, which is a philosophy podcast. But their interpretation was that one of the things with this, the difference with that community aspect, he goes to a school and becomes Catholic, is that there's an emphasis on community and proper works of charity.
Okay.
Integrating. Yeah. And one of the things that Daniel has suffered from is this individualism, the sort of individualist mode, which comes out in that capitalism, and comes out in that kind of sort of manufactured evangelical Christianity that they're trying to caricature. And one of the critiques they make, which I think is wrong, is that he was never ever a good person or nurturing or loving, that everything he did was he wanted to form his son into an extension of himself, and once he became useless, then the project was done.
Well, once he individuated, I think there is an element of that he is trying to make his son into an extension of himself, because he doesn't acknowledge his individuality when he does try to express it. In fact, when he does try to express it, when his son, as an accomplished partner, first a partner of Daniel Plainview and a businessman, an oil person in his own right, comes to tell him that, look, I'm going with Mary to Mexico, and I'm going to start my own oil rigging there and establish my own business. He not only accused him, that will make you my competitor. This was a very enigmatic scene. He also then abuses him. He's making fun of his deafness. Like, it's just horrible the way he denigrates him there, saying that I want to hear it with your voice, not with his flapping, and he does this with his hands, right, in order to make fun of signing. It's pretty terrible. And then in his voice, because he's deaf, right, he goes, I'm leaving you.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
And then he just disclosed to him, because you were never my son. He goes, I love you, but I'm leaving you.
The more I think about it, how wrong this interpretation is. So one, okay, the idea of a psychopath is someone with, let's just say, no humanity, like no compassion, no real. They don't see humans as ends in themselves. But in his discussion with his brother, he talked about how he built up his hatred, right? And in the end, he has this discussion with his son. But if you look at any kind of traumatic therapy and that, people get hurt, and then hurt people hurt others, right? If you look at his journey, we don't know what happened to him when he was young, right? There's been a lot of isolation and loneliness, and he did try to have an embrace with his son, but he can't help but make things worse in a way, because there's a difference with a good human that's been broken and then corrupted, whereas if you have someone like Eli, he is the psychopath. There was nothing good about him.
I do not doubt that Eli is the antagonist here, even more so than Daniel.
Here's my point. In the final scene, he is disgusting, Daniel, towards his son, because he feels like he's abandoning him, even though he abandoned the son first.
Yeah, it's like a...
So now he feels abandoned. So maybe he's acting out his hurt, which is why he behaves so...
Yeah, maybe his own abandonment issues.
Yeah.
And he doesn't ever mention his mother, so maybe he was abandoned by her.
Right.
No, it's very complicated. It's not straightforward.
But this is important. He wakes up the next day in a drunken stupor.
Yeah.
Because he knows what he's done was wrong.
What does he say to his son? We haven't mentioned it. Not only does he disclose that his son is an orphan, right? And then he starts making fun of him, saying, "Bastard in a basket," as in that's how he found him, in a basket. As his son gets up to leave, he says, "I'm glad that I have nothing of you in me," because that's the kind of complaint Daniel makes. I don't even know, you don't have anything in me, of me in you, sorry. So I don't know who you are. And then his son gets up and leaves with the person who signs for him, and Daniel is left with his new butler assistant. And then he drinks himself into a stupor. He's lying unconscious in his personal bowling alley somewhere in the mansion. And we come to the final scene.
Yeah, just before. All of those elements are part of defense mechanisms, I would say, rather than true representations of his narcissism. Like, he's had some...
I think it's both and.
Yeah, well,
it's both and. Yeah, you have to admit. I wouldn't paint him in I wouldn't paint him in a reductionist way as a total narcissistic psychopath, because there's a...
But that's what people do.
Well, that's a mistake. But he has those traits. He has them.
Yeah,
it's not that he doesn't have them.
I think... Anyway, I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out still.
Tell us about the final scene. What happens?
The final scene is... It's very hard to do it because I hate Eli so much, but he comes along and
Eli comes along
again, full of the pretensions and all the masquerading of his true intentions. He can't just admit that he's like, we're two grifters, let's do it. And he says, the hardships, this is the Great Depression era, hardships of, I can't, what is God's words? He's such a mystery. I don't know why I've fallen on such hard times. Tries to talk about how he wants to get some money to get some of this extra land of near the Bandies that hasn't been discovered for a while. And Daniel had been renting out that land. Now Bandy has died, and that land has been... So the pipeline is placed on that land to lead out to the ocean, and Bandy's grandson has inherited that land, and the grandson is a member of the Church of the Third Revelation, and now he wants to make a deal with Daniel in order to secure the future leasing of the land to Daniel, basically, in the name of in the name of that the grandson of Bandy, who is a member of the congregation. Daniel is playing along. He's eating steak, like, cold charcoal steak. He goes, so we can help you out there. He goes, because I really need this, Daniel. He goes, falling on hard times, so if we could just make an arrangement. He goes, the problem is, he goes, before he says that to him, he goes, first I want you to admit that God is a superstition and that you are a fake. I want you to admit you're a charlatan.
You're a charlatan.
And a false prophet.
And a false prophet, yeah.
And that God is a superstition.
So this way, Daniel does disclose his atheism pretty much explicitly at the end of the film. But he's turned the tables now on Eli. Eli humiliated Daniel in the church by getting Daniel to confess his sin of abandoning his son. Now he's going to, even privately, get Eli to confess that he's a charlatan. He goes, well, that's not true, I can't say it, but if I must. And he says it
what
quietly.
you want.
If that's what you want,
believe.
if that's what you believe, he goes, I am a charlatan and a false prophet, and God is a superstition. He goes, louder, Daniel. Louder, Eli. And he says it louder. He goes, pretend like your congregation is here in front of you, the way that you say it. And then he screams it out. So his conscience has also been affected now. In the same way that Eli had pricked Daniel's conscience to admit what he had done in relation to his son, symmetrically, Daniel has pricked Eli's conscience to be honest about the fact that he's full of it. He's a liar, that God doesn't speak through him, and that he's a manipulator. And then that is when Daniel reveals to him what? It's tapped dry, that land that you want to lease me. All the oil's gone, there's nothing there. He goes, what do you mean? Well, you explain that.
Well, and that gets back to my point about the Freudian Lacan analysis, whatever I'm calling it now, is he says your brother Paul was the one, he's the cunning one, he's the chosen one. Now remember, their dad is named Abel, Cain and Abel. There's a competition, right?
Yeah.
And of course, Cain and Abel, there's not much of the mother in that story. So there's a lot of these symbolic analogies. But he says, he was the chosen one. He was the one when you slithered out of your mother's canal. He was the one sucking at her teat. You should have been put in a jar somewhere.
Yeah, which is a play on, those kind of freak shows in the early 20th century as part of those traveling carnivals and circuses where they had fetuses with defects in jars.
Yeah.
I mean, Daniel compares Eli to that, and Eli's crying, why are you doing this? Why are you doing? And then he explains to him what he's done in relation to taking all the oil with an analogy.
Yeah, I haven't figured it out, but he says, imagine, he does this little dance, and because he's woken up from his drunken stupor, he can't walk straight, and he goes, imagine you have a milkshake, and I have a milkshake, and I have a straw, and walks back and demonstrates this all the way over here. My straw reaches over. I drink your milkshake. Because it's so intense.
Yeah, so intensely.
But he does this little dance.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
It is like a carnival, he really insulting.
Insulting, carnival-like. It's kind of entered into the realm of the absurd a little bit here. And then he basically chases Eli around the bowling alley. And while Eli is terrified for his life. We're friends, we're brothers because actually, Eli still believes, he's under the impression, of course, that HW is Daniel's son, and HW is married to Mary, who's Eli's sister. He goes, but we're brothers. He's chasing him around the bowling alley, and then he knocks him down by hitting him with a wooden bowling pin, and then he pummels him 2 more times in the head with it, and Daniel Plainview murders Eli in the bowling alley with a pool of blood kind of gathering as Daniel sits down, and the butler hears it, comes downstairs, he goes, Mr. Plainview, is everything all right? And then in a nonchalant way, as though he's puffed out, but he goes, I'm finished. And that's how the film ends.
Well, there's a little, I've never been able to quite make it at the end. They walk through with excruciating detail the slow procession the butler coming down as if it's just an ordinary event. So you think about what must be happening in this house. He's shooting things, he's just doing whatever he wants. He's an oil magnet, controls all these supreme power, right? And then the butler stares at him, says, Mr. Plainview, nonchalant.
Yeah,
which is
as though nothing had just happened.
Yeah.
Like he's used to this crazy behaviour from it. Look, this film, as a character study, it's driven by Daniel Day-Lewis in a way that is perhaps one of the best, most nuanced performances I've ever seen in film. He got the Academy Award for it, he deserved it. Paul Dano is brilliant as Eli, and it shows the diversity of his range. He was recently cast as the Riddler, like a serial killer-like version of the Riddler in The Batman, the Robert Pattinson one. And he was very good in that as well. So Dano's gone off in a very good trajectory. He's not quite Daniel Day-Lewis. Performances are great. All of these psychological themes, these socio-political themes and religious themes, they are kind of rife to be mined, okay? Because there's a lot going on here. Look, even Russell and I have not fully agreed in terms of any unilateral interpretation of what takes place in this film. It's Paul Thomas Anderson's masterpiece. How many popcorn boxes?
Well, I just want to give my two little wrap-ups there, because one thing we missed is often when you do movie reviews, people don't talk about the score.
Yeah.
And Johnny Greenwood, who's from one of my favourite bands, Radiohead, does the score. But this was what I heard in the discussion about it, so I'm not sure how accurate it is, but that they wanted it to kind of have a sort of vibe of a horror film. And you see that at these scenes where these beautiful, poetic, the Wild West landscape has this haunting music. And the whole way through the film, I kept thinking, haunting? Like horror, terrifying.
The sound, I mean, it splices the genres of horror and the Western in a very character-focused, character-driven story, which has religious and socio-political and more socioeconomic themes. So it's really complicated, very layered, very nuanced.
But go and listen to the score of every single Western you like, old or new. There's no The Doors, Riders on the Storm. There's no kind of feeling of momentum and journey and adventure.
Yeah, like the Ennio Morricone stuff. Wow. There's nothing like that. No, which is a bit more exciting and quirky.
It's terror.
It's terror. It's haunting. It's haunting.
So that is one thing that I find really interesting. But the main thing that I would wrap from it is that, like the interview with Paul Thomas Anderson, that is that it's supposed to be a mystery. You're not supposed to interpret it yourself. We're going back to what we talked about, the text is itself. No one can know the true interpretation. It could go on forever, but it has to be one of the greatest films ever, because every single component of it means that it gets in not only the top 10, 5 out of 5 bags of popcorn for a genre. Remember my rule, in a genre, 5 out of 5 popcorn bags for films of all time. It's in the top 5 so far, which is, at the moment, Mario and I are working on trying to collate our different top 10. But at the moment, because I've got The Godfather, Assassination of Jesse James, No Country for Old Men, and the other ones, Citizen Kane.
Citizen Kane. So he's a big Western fan, this guy, because you've got several. I mean, No Country for Old Men, a Western, right?
Yeah.
Assassination of Jesse James, a Western. So although I really appreciate the genre, especially coming out of the Italian context with Sergio Leone, who I love for Once Upon a Time in America in particular. I'm not as keen on it as you, although I love the films that we've just spoken about. So I give it 5 bags out of popcorn. Five popcorn bags as well.
Wait, 5 bags of popcorn out of 5?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would give it 6 if it weren't terribly insulting and offensive to your grading system.
You can't break the rule.
Okay.
Which I've said I've stolen from another film review show. But 5 bags out of popcorn. But this one's so good that I'd give it an extra...
Give it a candy bar as well. A large Coke.
A Choc Top.
A Choc Top. Can't get any better than that, friends. If you have not seen There Will Be Blood, make it a priority. And we will see you next time on Terra Symbolica with another film review.